I am Major General Ulysses S. Grant, and you find me at my headquarters near Vicksburg, Mississippi. It is July the 1st of 1863. I have just ordered that there will be an all-out assault on the lines on July the 6th. Pemberton can't hold out much longer. I think there will be little, if any, resistance, and we will take Vicksburg on July the 6th. Now, information that has driven, in part, that decision has come to hand about Pemberton's dilemma, and he's got one, more so than I realized. Now, on May the 18th, we drove Pemberton back into Vicksburg. Joe Johnston arrived in Jackson on May the 13th. He had about 6,000 men there in Jackson, Mississippi. So I decided at that time, rather than to go due north out of Port Gibson, Mississippi, to go to the northeast and take Jackson, Mississippi, so I wouldn't have Joe Johnston, whom I greatly respect, on my rear as I am turning to go for Vicksburg and Pemberton. In fact, I expected to take Vicksburg without too much trouble, and that did not prove to be the case. But the siege has been ongoing since the 18th of May. It's July the 1st, and information, as I said, has come to me that I should like to share with you. On June the 15th, Pemberton sent this message to Joe Johnston. The enemy has placed several heavy guns in position against our works and is approaching them very nearly by sap. His fire is almost continuous. Our men have no relief and becoming much fatigued, but are still in pretty good spirits. I think your movement should be made as soon as possible. The enemy is receiving reinforcements, and we are living on greatly reduced rations, but I think sufficient for 20 days. Now, that was on June 15th, and essentially the correspondence between Joseph E. Johnston and John C. Pemberton began in earnest on June the 15th. I am amassing troops by the day. Johnston's got, by my best estimates, 31,000 men, and he is to my east, around and north of Jackson, Mississippi. In fact, fully half my army. Sherman's got some 6 divisions with 2 in reserve that are facing Jackson. Should Johnston come out and give us battle, which I would relish. It would suit me very well for Johnston to sally forth and come give me battle. I'd love for that to happen. But Pemberton in Vicksburg has got 31,000 men, and they're getting no more men, and they're not getting any more supplies, and their belts are having to be cinched daily, so to speak. But on the 15th, Pemberton sent this entreaty to Johnston. Now, Johnston, who told Jefferson Davis as soon as he got to Jackson, I am too late. Now, this was on May the 14th. He said, I'm too late. The Yankees are already between me and Pemberton. So it didn't seem like Johnston was planning on putting up much of a fight to save Pemberton. He's encouraging Pemberton steadily, evacuate Vicksburg, save the army. The place is not as important as the army. President Davis is commander-in-chief is telling him hold Vicksburg to the last man. So Pemberton's caught in the middle, but he is caught firmly in Vicksburg where I have him wedged. But Johnston replied on June the 22nd to that June 15th note from Pemberton, and he said, General Pemberton, your dispatch of the 15th received. General Richard Taylor is sent by General E.K. Smith, Edmund Kirby Smith, to cooperate with you from the west bank of the river, to throw in supplies, and to cross with his force if expedient and practicable. I will have the means of moving toward the enemy in a day or two, and will try to make a diversion in your favor, and, if possible, communicate with you, though I fear my force is too small to effect the latter. I have only 2/3 of the force you told Messenger Sanders to state to me as the least with which you think I ought to make an attack. If I can do nothing to relieve you, rather than surrender the garrison, endeavor to cross the river at the last moment, if you and General Taylor communicate. J.E. Johnston. Well, obviously it took a week for Johnston to be able to reply. He is trying to maneuver such that Dick Taylor can come across the river. Well, I would imagine Admiral David Farragut, or David D. Porter rather, would have a great deal to say about that matter, about boats coming across the Mississippi into Vicksburg, since he's got a fleet of warships there in the river with more than 100 guns firing on the city. So Dick Taylor is not going to get across the river, and John C. Pemberton is not going to get across the river going to the west either. So this is becoming a very tense situation for Pemberton, because he's beginning to realize he's not going to get any help. Well, the next communication that came to my hand is this. On June the 23rd, from Pemberton to Johnston, June 23rd, 1863. If I cut my way out, this important position is lost, and many of my men too. Can we afford that? If I cannot cut my way out, both position and all my men are lost. This we cannot afford. I should suggest the probability of Grant's being open to terms that can result more to our advantage than either of the above actions. Not knowing your force or plans, he may accede to your proposition to pass this army out with all its arms and equipage. This proposal would come with greater prospects of success and better grace from you, while it necessarily cannot come from me. You could make the showing of my ability and strength to hold our position for several weeks longer, which, together with his impression regarding your strength, might operate upon him to comply with your terms. While I make this suggestion, I still renew my hope of your being, by force of arms, enabled to act with me in saving this vital point. I will strain every nerve to hold out, if there is hope of our ultimate relief, for 15 days longer. It is reported that some of the enemy's forces have moved along the Halls Ferry Road to Big Bayou near Warrenton, where they are temporarily massing. These movements indicate the lengthening of the enemy's lines and the increase of the area of his operations. J.C. Pemberton. So here we see that Pemberton is hinting, well, actually suggesting, that Johnston approached me with negotiations and a surrender, and says it needs to come from you, not me. And he ends the communication with the federal forces going south of Vicksburg to Warrenton, which is just south of Vicksburg, and lengthening the lines. The lines they're more than 8 miles long of trenches. And he was correct. We were going there, and we were massing, because, as I said earlier, I had directed on July 1st that we would attack an all-out attack on all the trenches and lines between Pemberton and us. So that was sent on June 23rd. On June 27th, Johnston replied, General Pemberton, your dispatch of the 22nd received. General E.K. Smith's troops have been mismanaged and have fallen back to Delhi. I have sent a special messenger urging him to assume the direct command. The determined spirit you manifest and his expected cooperation encourage me to hope that something may yet be done to save Vicksburg and to postpone both of the modes suggested of merely extricating the garrison. Negotiations with Grant for the relief of the garrison, should they become necessary, must be made by you. He's put it back on Pemberton. It would be a confession of weakness on my part, which I ought not to make, to propose them. When it becomes necessary to make terms, they may be considered as made under my authority. J.E. Johnston. But now, General Pemberton never got this message. It was intercepted. One of the messengers was a spy working for us, and it came to my hand, as I said earlier. Now, on June 28th, after Pemberton has time to stew about this and peep over the breastworks or through the breastworks at an ever-increasing federal army, as I said, we ultimately got 70,000 plus troops. He's becoming more and more concerned, and the men are getting, their rations are down to a biscuit and a mouthful of bacon per day. And a man can't fight on that little food. Now, he got a letter, an anonymous letter. He contends he got the letter. There's question about the authenticity of this missive, but Pemberton contends he got it, and I should like to share it with you because it accurately, even if it was a contrivance that Pemberton came up with, even if it's a total fiction, it still describes the condition of Pemberton's army at that time. In the trenches near Vicksburg, June 28, 1863, General J.C. Pemberton. Sir, in accordance with my own feelings and that of my fellow soldiers with whom I have conferred, I submit to your serious consideration the following note. We as an army have as much confidence in you as a commanding general as we perhaps ought to have. Bit tepid there. We believe you have displayed as much generalship as any other man could have done under similar circumstances. We give you great credit for the stern patriotism you have evinced in the defense of Vicksburg during a protracted and unparalleled siege. I also feel proud of the gallant conduct of the soldiers under your command in repulsing the enemy at every assault, and bearing with patient endurance all the privations and hardships incident to a siege of 40-odd days' duration. Everybody admits that we have covered ourselves in glory, but alas, General, a crisis has arrived in the midst of our siege. Our rations have been cut down to one biscuit and a small bit of bacon per day. Not enough scarcely to keep soul and body together, much less to stand the hardships we are called upon to stand. We are actually on sufferance, and the consequence is, as far as I can hear, there is complaining and general dissatisfaction throughout our lines. We are and have been kept close in the trenches day and night, not allowed to forage any at all, and even if permitted, there is nothing to be had among the citizens. Men don't want to starve and don't intend to, but they call upon you for justice. If the commissary department can give it, or call upon for justice if the commissary department can give it. If it can't, you must adopt some means to relieve us very soon. The emergency of the case demands prompt and decided action on your part. If you can't feed us, you had better surrender us. Horrible as the idea is, then suffer this noble army to disgrace itself by desertion. I tell you plainly, men are not going to lie here and perish if they do love their country dearly. Self-preservation is the first law of nature, and hunger will compel a man to do almost anything. This army is now ripe for mutiny unless it can be fed. Just think of one small biscuit and one or two mouthfuls of bacon per day. General, please direct your inquiries in the proper channel and see if I have not stated stubborn facts, which had better be heeded before we are disgraced. And it's signed from many soldiers. So the veracity of that is to be challenged. Is it a fiction? Was it actually an anonymous letter that was written? I do not know, but I do know it's an accurate assessment of the condition of Pemberton's army, all the while he is appealing to Joe Johnston to come help him come from the east, and he's not finding out he's not going to get Johnston to come help him. In fact, Johnston is suggesting wild schemes about going across the river through David Porter's fleet, or the Confederates Dick Taylor coming across the river through David Porter's fleet to give him some relief and push out and break their way out through my army, which is getting bigger by the day. On July the 1st, Pemberton sent this note out to his 4 division commanders. Unless the siege of Vicksburg is raised or supplies are thrown in, it will become necessary very shortly to evacuate the place. I see no prospect of the former, and there are many great, if not insuperable, obstacles in the way of the latter. You are therefore requested to inform me with as little delay as possible as to the condition of your troops and their ability to make the marches and undergo the fatigues necessary to accomplish a successful evacuation. I sent that to he sent that to Major Generals Carter Stevenson, John Forney, Martin L. Smith, and John S. Bowen, who'd been a neighbor of mine in St. Louis. We were good friends. 2 of them came back and immediately said surrender, and the other 2 said essentially surrender. One of them, I think, indicated we can fight, but it's not going to do any good. That was on July the 1st. The next day, on July the 2nd, Pemberton sent to those same 4 division commanders this statement. Well, gentlemen, I have heard your voices, and I agree with your almost unanimous decision, though my own preference would be to put myself at the head of my troops and make a desperate effort to cut our way through the enemy. That is my only hope of saving myself from shame and disgrace. Far better would it be for me to die at the head of my army, even in a vain effort to force the enemy's lines, than to surrender it and live and meet the obloquy which I know will be heaped upon me. But my duty is to sacrifice myself to save the army, which has so nobly done its duty to defend Vicksburg. I therefore concur with you and shall offer to order or to surrender this army on the 4th of July. I am a northern man. I know my people. I know their peculiar weaknesses and their national vanity. I know we can get better terms from them on the 4th of July than on any other day of the year. We must sacrifice our pride to these considerations. So on July the 2nd, Pemberton sent out that statement that he was going to offer to surrender to me on the 4th of July, the next day being the 3rd of July, which he obviously felt would be the time necessary to surrender. I failed to see how he could possibly have thought all of it could come to pass on one day, but obviously he did, and it did come to pass. It happened that quickly. And it's odd about Pemberton. He had 2 brothers who were fighting for the Union, although he went south. He had 30,000 troops, 31,000 troops, but half of them were either on the sick list or essentially unable to be effective combat troops, so he was down to about half strength. By this time, on July the 2nd, he's got 30,000 men in Vicksburg. Johnston's got 30,000 men in Jackson, 50 miles to the east, and I've got 71,000 in the middle, looking to Vicksburg with Pemberton and Jackson with Johnston. As I've said, I welcomed Johnston sallying forth to give me battle. I wanted that to happen. But then we had gotten so close by July the 1st that all along our lines there were at least 10 places where we were between 5 and 100 yards, from 15 feet to 300 feet from the enemy's lines, in 10 places. And the artillery was well armed and stocked. Embrasures had been widened. Exits in the lines had been widened for more troops to move faster. I'd issued the orders for an all-out assault on July the 6th and was fully expecting that to happen. But Pemberton, obviously, with all these exchanges between himself and Joe Johnston, his commanding officer, and with his officers, his 4 division commanders, and with apparently, allegedly, many of his soldiers anonymously. And he had come to the resolution that he was going to surrender the army on his plan was July the 4th. We shall see. But at this time, I have fully reviewed with you the dilemma that Pemberton was in that led to his proposing to come to me to surrender Vicksburg. And I feel I have said for the moment quite enough. So I am Major General Ulysses S. Grant in my headquarters tent in Vicksburg, and I bid you, as I go about my business, a fond adieu.